what's the other one I'm thinking of?
Or Tito Puente is the person who asked.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to CMCB. Thank you for being here in person. I know we have a couple of guests online as well. My name is Jessica. I'm the Senior Director of Development and External Relations here at CMCB. And so for those of you who have not been here before, we are a nonprofit music education organization. We're over 100 years old, and we are dedicated to learner-centered and culturally inclusive music education here in the South End. Across our community music school and community engagement programs, we do work with over 2,000 students on a weekly basis, and we are very proud to be the largest outside provider of arts education to the Boston Public Schools. This is the second of 3 community conversations. The next one is in June, on June 11th. And we'll be featuring local executives from other organizations across Boston, such as the BSO, EBA, and the Franklin Cummings Tech. And that will be hosted over in Nubian. You can find out some more details in your program book or on our website. Another couple of small plugs. We are enrolling for our summer program, specifically our 4-week-long summer program, Summer Arts and Music. You can learn more about that on our website or in the program book as well. And lastly, these events are all free and open to the public, and we hope that you will consider making a donation to support our work. If you are interested in supporting CMCB today, you can do so again on our website or by visiting the table that's right outside of Allen Hall. We are very excited for tonight's event. I will kick it over to the moderators to do introductions and to get us started. But thank you again for being here, and I hope you enjoy the conversation.
Amazing. Oh,
Hello.
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 Our mics are on.
I think our mics are on, or I just talk loudly. All of the above can be true.
So I'm Jared Field. I am the Director of Programming for our Community Music School, which is all of our internal programming, classes, private lessons, and ensembles.
My name is Rachel Chow. I'm the Director of Programming for our community engagement programs. So all of our community-based and all of our music therapy work. And we are obviously here today with incredible humans that I'm so excited to be with. And oh, sorry.
No.
Oh no, after you.
We're too polite.
Too polite.
So this event is Student Pathways in Practice. Those of you who were here last year, we had a talk with some of our faculty about the work that we've done in Student Pathways, and Rachel and I will give you a little preview of that in case you weren't here last year. But our distinguished panel were selected because we see them as embodiments of where our pathways can lead to. So I think we'll start off with introductions from each of our panelists, and then Rachel and I will talk a little bit more about what our pathways framework is at CMCB.
Is it okay if I pass it starting here? Because I also will say you are from Texas, so I'm gonna immediately lean on you. And also dressed very cool. We got a great dress panel. We have a very, very cool panel tonight. Would you mind introducing yourself and sharing a little bit about the work that you're currently doing?
Yes. So good evening, everyone. My name is Siad Wells, and pronouns she, her, and I am the executive director at Castle of Our Skins. Castle of Our Skins is a concert and education series, Boston-based, that celebrates Black artistry through music, primarily classical music, though we have been known to play a Beyonce tune, sometimes. So I came to Boston just under 2 years ago to do that work. I believe very deeply in what we do and what we stand for, and so that's why I came here, and I'm excited to talk more with each of you about that today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wells. I'm gonna pass it over to coming all the way from East Boston.
Hello. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me, CMBCB. Awesome to be here. This is awesome to be able to speak on Pathways. My name is Corey DePina. I am a founding member and the program director for an amazing nonprofit out in East Boston called Zumix. We do creative arts and creative tech and media with young people starting at the age of 7 until they graduate high school. We just celebrated 34 years of awesome work in the community in April. Individually, I am a songwriter, performer, hip hop artist. I am a teaching artist extraordinaire and a leader in our state for creative youth development and helping to kind of amplify the field of teaching artistry nationwide. And I am also a founder of the Fogu Project, which was my effort to build music spaces on the island of Fogu in the west coast of Africa. And currently we have 3 spaces serving a bunch of young people as they learn about the impact of creative arts education on the island.
Thank you.
Um,
AJ, take it away.
Awesome. Hello, my name is AJ Gaudreau. I am here representing the Community Music Center today. I work as a music therapist here. I've been doing community music therapy work for the last few years now. Been at the Community Music Center for just over a year. I am always very much interested in the work that I get to do with a whole wide array of different people exploring music and what it means to them. And it's really amazing to get to do that work. So.
Hi, everyone. My name is Josue Gonzalez. I'm the executive director of ProjectSTEP, the nation's first and oldest, sorry, well, I guess it's implied, first college and career pathway program for students of color in classical music, trailblazing organization. Started that work back in the early 80s when the words DEI didn't exist. There are many copies where there can only be one, ProjectSTEP. Thank you very much. I've been there for 3 years, and starting Monday, I will actually be transitioning to be the new Vice President of Education and External Engagement for the Boston Symphony, which I'm very, very excited about.
Wow.
And hoping to continue our partnership with ProjectSTEP in the years to come and expand more of our partnerships with organizations like the ones that are here tonight. So I'll just leave it there. Yeah, thank you.
Man,
Amazing.
hot off the presses.
Yes, I think my mic is on now, hopefully. Yes, amazing. Great. We have, as you can see, a very distinguished panel here. So we'd like to give a brief presentation about the Pathways program at CMCB. If you go to the next slide, please. So in 2023, we began to use this concept of student pathways after 2 studies of the work that our teachers have already been doing at CMCB. The idea for this came from the reality that students come to a music school like ours not only because they want to go become performance majors or perform for a large orchestra or a formal classical setting. There are a lot of different reasons why students want to learn music, and by having this model, we emphasize our learner-centered teaching and our student-centered constructivist approach to our music lessons. So we have 4 different pathways that students can embark on when they come to CMCB. On the next slide, we have citizen musicians, which are students who take actions to create positive change. Do you want to do community?
Yeah, community musicians, so creating music collaboratively and emphasizing the communal aspect of music making.
Musical explorers, which engage across an intentionally wide range of music-related content areas.
And for performing musicians, for those who are really excited about the concept of creating music and sharing it.
And these pathways arise from our 3 pillars of curricular instruction, which is musical artistry, cultural inclusion, and social emotional learning. You can see that musical explorer is kind of in the center of all 3 of these. So student who likes to explore all these different components. Performing musician leans more heavily on the musical artistry side, but still engages with cultural inclusion and social emotional learning. And the same is true for citizen musician and community musician as well. So all students are engaging with all of these pillars, just to different percentages. So I'd love to ask each of our panelists, which pathway or pathways do you and or your organizations resonate with the most, and why? Maybe we can start with Josue and work backwards this time.
Yeah, I would say, hello? Hello? There we go. Thank you. I think given the nature of our program, the sort of performance pathway is definitely the most evident. But what I'll say about that specifically is that I think ultimately all of these pathways, what they have in common is just human connection. And so even though our students definitely focus much more on the sort of performance excellence side of things, it's a means to an end, right? It's a vehicle for connection with themselves as students, for connections with their teachers, with their community, and the broader classical and general public at large. And so I'll leave it at that, but was there any other part of the question that might have missed?
No, that's perfect. I
Okay.
think that a thing that we always think about performing musicians is you bring so much of yourself authentically. And a thing that I really appreciate about the work of ProjectSTEP and is that you are teaching young students to bring themselves authentically into spaces that have traditionally not been made for them. So being authentically, genuinely a performing musician means to show up as yourself and to create that space for yourself.
And that's a hallmark of our program for sure. I think as those of, at least I'll include myself, those of us who've been through the sort of the classical music rigmarole, that was not ever, that was never, ever, ever sort of part of the conversation. It was
Yeah.
like, this is what you're supposed to do. This is the way you're supposed to do it. And if you don't do it this way, you're a failure.
Yeah.
And so I think we've been able to really completely flip it on its head and sort of reverse the narrative to what you also just so eloquently described.
Yeah. I think going into that, I would love actually, AJ, to hear your thoughts on what it means to be an authentic musician. AJ, in case you did not make it clear, has an incredible clinical background as a music therapist. Just came back today, like 30 minutes ago, finished working with some folks. So fresh, hot off the presses from there. And then this morning was working in elderly care. So what does it mean for you? What does it mean to explore musicianhood, to explore music? How do you feel like you can speak to that?
Yeah, I think when it comes to like music explorers and that general exploration of figuring out who you are as a musician, I think it's really just kind of embracing that ebb and flow of being, comfortable in the journey and kind of the process of where you're going. I feel like there's a lot of oscillating between a lot of the other areas of performing musician, citizen musician, community musician, that really kind of come into contact with a musical explorer, and the way that you kind of get that opportunity to really try and see what feels authentic to oneself. And yeah, it's really kind of that moving between those different areas and feeling kind of what feels right in the moment. And sometimes that remains the same throughout our life experience, and it changes depending on the seasons of where we are in our lives.
Corey, if I can pass it to you, because I remember the first time, I think we have actually not interacted. Now this is like a very weird thing. We've not interacted that much, but I remember the first time I was around you, my predecessor, Chris Perry, was like, Corey is the coolest person. You should hang out with Corey, and spoke so passionately about what you do in East Boston. And I remember a conversation that we had recently where you talked about how much that community and that neighborhood has shaped your musical journey. I was wondering if you could speak to that, kind of the intersection of community and musicianhood.
Yeah, well, first let me say thank you for the question. It was really awesome to dive and think back about the impact that community has had on my evolution. One person can be a part of many communities, and so it's really important to think about the idea that for me, being a hip hop artist, even starting back at church when I was a young person, that being my first musical community, I remember being too young to be in the choir, but singing so loud that they had no other choice but to go against the choir. And so there've always been adults in the room who were like, let's give this young person an opportunity or a chance. My elementary school teacher was the first person to like let me write a book report in rhyme and present it. And that changed my whole approach to like literacy and to reading and writing and presenting. Community centers like Zumix are really amazing. The idea of thinking about what doesn't exist or what's not around, and then creating a space for people to show up around that thing, and then being able to have that community in that space, whether it's a place to jam or whether it's like a whole bunch of different musicians and coming to a camp for the first time and meeting other musicians, or having a spoken word poetry slam, or even just having dinner, getting people together to kind of like to feel the sense and awareness of community has been really important. People showing up, the city being able to support artists with like grants and opportunities and being connected to that part of the community. And then really with my work with the Fogel Project, the idea of catalyzing, right? Yeah, I've gone through this phase, I've met my community, I've gotten all these resources and was able to develop myself as an artist. How can I give back? How can I then start the Fogel Project, where I ask other musicians for instruments to help future musicians do their thing, or ask people who don't have instruments, do you care enough to give $1 to help other people have their and shape their community, specifically in a place where adultism is really big and they don't think young people should have an instrument or a $1,000 microphone because they don't know what to do with it. When in fact, it was somebody in my community who gave me that opportunity, which led me to where I'm at today. So it's really cool to think about community as like a single individual finding a space where they can be themselves, feel supported, meet other people, and then that leads to like organizing, advocacy, and giving back. And that's been really cool to just reflect on that and think about that in terms of like my approach to community and what it means as an artist. People showing up, people learning and giving back.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Cool.
I love hearing about the elementary school teacher who let you write in rhyme. That's a great example of getting to that content area, but in a way that works for the individual student. And if she hadn't done that, who knows how you would have connected. That's phenomenal. That's the kind of work that we try to do here as well. And we'll close it out with Siad.
Yeah, so I was thinking a lot of like, what does it mean to be a citizen musician, and why is that relevant? Why is that important to me? And I was reflecting on this idea that citizen artistry, citizen musicians believe that music is in service to or for some reason. And I think I didn't mention that I play the guitar. And so Tuesday I was practicing after I finished work, and I was like playing this piece, and I was like, why am I doing this? Like, I was like, self, like, what are you doing here? Like, you've been trying to get this dotted 16th note rhythm down for like years, as I've like, performed the piece and then keep going back to it. And then I was thinking about the person who composed it. He's a living composer. His name is Thomas Flippen. He's Black. And he's a really great colleague of mine now, and also a guitar player. And I was like, oh, I'm doing this because I want people to know that I like this piece and that this piece is important. And that the story behind this piece, which he describes as being inspired by his relationship with two people who were from Bosnia, like, that's important. And that's something that I want to uplift and I want other people to know about. So I think that's what citizen artistry is about. It's like being in service of something, to something, and for someone.
Yeah. I will say the part that was largely inspiring was the fact that you finished work and you still practiced. I, as a musician, I am astounded and amazed.
Well, I won't do it in the morning. So, if it doesn't happen after work,
We'll get to that. That's the later panel, is setting up healthy habits. I think when we were talking about this, and Jared and I have had a lot of conversations about this, I think we've talked a lot about how most people, I think, especially most musicians, have been all of these things at different points. I remember when I first started playing piano, and I was so strongly, it was because my grandmother played piano, so I was like, I want to do that because I saw her do that. Or when you first started, you had that thing you connected to. But as I've grown and as I've evolved, as you talked about your own evolution, there are all these different things that music has meant to me. And it's sometimes it's been because I'm part of a legacy. And sometimes it's been like, because I can say whatever I want. And sometimes it's been just like, this is the thing that calms me down and helps me connect to a thing that matters. And so we talk a lot about what music means to us. So I think a question I really want to ask all of you is when you first started your musical journey, what did music mean to you then? And now, as the person at this panel, what does music mean to you now? I know AJ the best, so I'm gonna pressure him into this one.
Sure, sure. You know, I think for me, when thinking about this question, you know, what it really meant to me when I first started was that it was a space for me to feel free and to be, you know, recognized for something. You know, I hadn't really figured myself out. I'm still not totally figuring myself out on a day-to-day basis, you know. But, you know, exploring music for the first time really gave me a space and a place to really feel like I had something, I had a voice, I had something that I wanted to contribute. And it took me a while to kind of like get to a point of knowing exactly what that is. And again, still searching, still journeying. But you know, it really kind of for me felt like that first place where I felt like I had the capacity to really connect with other people and to really develop an identity for myself and like really start to build you know, more layers into what that all means as the little boy who is getting into the all boys choir and just joining that. So yeah.
Anyone else have an answer? We can...
Sure. So music back then was freedom for me. It was liberation. I'm a hip hop artist. I listened to hip hop music as a young person, and there was a lot of narratives about my community that I could relate to that nobody else was talking about. As an artist, when I first performed, you guys know Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Performing brought me from the physiological, like psychological needs, all the way up to self-actualization. I skipped all 4 levels. I went from like not knowing how to eat and how to save myself to like people praising me and asking me. So then I had to like work back from that, right? And think about esteem, love and belonging and happiness. But the dopamine and the adrenaline and the confidence and the visionary lens that it gave me at such a young age was like everything. It made me feel wanted. It made me realize that I do deserve to like learn and be a student, and that I can not go to jail and be creative and be a person and a part of my community in a positive way, and not just a negative stereotype. And then now it's super precious. Music is very spiritual for me now. It's my way of documenting my life and capturing the moments. I take it as a very serious, personal part of me sharing with the rest of the world. I don't have any kids. I don't plan to have any kids. How I leave my legacy, I think, is through my art and through the work that I do. And so it becomes super important to me. I don't make music nowadays to sell records. I make music to let it out and to, because I have it in me. I just don't want to like keep it in me, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. This way, could I pass it to you?
This is going to sound really silly because I guess I just never really thought of it, which is ridiculous. But when you just mentioned about legacy, I actually have 2 older sisters, and the reason that I ended up getting into music was because they started on, you know, taking violin lessons through it was a free sort of outreach program through the DC Youth Orchestras. And when I was 3 years old, I was like, I mean, I'm gonna do that too, right? Like, can I get a violin too? Like, you know, it's kind of like, this is what we do, right? We all play an instrument, and it's a violin, right? And it wasn't until I was about 5 where I ended up seeing an orchestra perform and realized that there was other instruments, and that cellists could sit down when they learned how to play
That is
instruments.
that is the
And that
most
was
important
it
thing.
blew my mind. I was like, you can sit down when you play? Those of you who have a child in Suzuki or something, that was the method that we learned. You have to stand up for, a half hour at a time.
Yeah, you
I,
gotta
I
sit.
couldn't be bothered.
You gotta sit.
I could not be bothered. And I guarantee the cellists that you know in your life, most of them have the exact same story. So I think for me, it was sort of realizing that it was just something that you did at home. To I think going through high school and college and early adulthood, where it really became a method for me to connect with others. Those of you who know me, I've never been, I could never do what you do, like create my own music and just perform by myself. Like that's not my thing. My thing is playing with others. Chamber music and orchestra, but specifically chamber music for me was just a way of connecting with people who could instantly become my friends. To be vulnerable with a small group of people, to be intimate with them in all of these different musical and artistic ways, was just so enthralling. And it ended up, taking me to all sorts of different parts of the country, parts of the world, and opening me up to so many different experiences. And so for me, in my role now, what I wish is to be able to pass that feeling along and give opportunities for others to be able to access those amazing opportunities to travel, to have those moments to grow together, and to be able to just make music, but also just make beautiful friendships together.
Absolutely. Everyone else?
I am an only child. I know. Be jealous.
A little bit.
Yes. And so I think music for me has, as so many other people have said here, provided an opportunity to connect with other people. Like, yes, I do play the classical guitar, and yes, it is a very kind of solo, intimate thing. But I like to play and perform because people are there, and that's fun. It's challenging. But I also like to play because it helps me connect with myself. Spending 4 hours a day sometimes, I don't know how we do that, but spending 4 hours a day sometimes practicing, like you really get to know a lot about yourself and what matters most to you, what's most important, what challenges you. And I think music can provide a lot of those different points of connection.
Thank you all so much. I think,
I just want to piggyback off of that, and I completely agree. And I think through my lens, working with others, like in a chamber group setting, was a different way of being able to get to know ourselves through others. That's one more beautiful point you made.
Yeah, I think this is such a rich question, and I loved hearing just the range of answers. And you can already see how the pathways are kind of intersecting and blending together in some of the responses that you all shared. I think just a little bit about my own journey. I started playing clarinet because my mom played the clarinet. And I grew up through an elementary, middle, high school band program, which tends to be pretty competitive, tends to be very focused on the performance aspect of like, you've got to be first chair, you've got to get into districts or all state. And it was only, and in late high school, I started composing a little bit, and my band director wasn't really that supportive of me. And only in college, I started to compose a little bit more. I took lessons. I joined the choir because they needed more tenors, and I, fell in love with that. And my opportunities kind of broadened, and my understanding of what I could do with music really broadened a lot. And I think, when I thought about music as a child, it was, clarinet, band, like this is the one way. And yeah, I knew there was an orchestra and a choir, but like band is where it's at. And only as I got older could I see that I could really explore a lot of different pathways through music. So the next section of this conversation, we have a couple of questions kind of tied with each of the pathways in particular. And so we'll offer them to the panelists who connected the most with this pathway. But again, since there's so much flexibility and moving in between the pathways, anyone can feel free to answer these. But this first question is for Josue as a performing musician. We'd love to hear just advice that you have for young performers. And I'm sure this is something you've given a lot for your ProjectSTEP students as well.
Yeah, and I'm so proud of them because they really do embody a lot of the advice that I give to just students generally, and in college or in high school or any age. Um, it's just to be kind to each other, be generous, be kind, and put down your cell phones and have conversations um, for multiple reasons. It's good for you. But also, if you ever want to work in the music industry, make sure that you build bridges and you don't burn them. The world gets very, very small the older you get in the classical music world. And trust me, I'm a very nice person, but there are certain people that, if someone asks me, I'm just going to be honest about that. But no, just being kind and being generous with each other is usually what I preach. And I mean, if you come in on a Saturday, um, and Megan was able to see a video of some students wishing me farewell and good luck in my next position. And I mean, you could just it's a beautiful thing. I'm gonna start crying again. Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, okay. Get the tiny tissue. I think I actually have a question for Corey about kind of like performance. What connected to you in your performance journey? What was it that you, when you talk to now the youth of Zumix, what advice do you give them?
A couple of things, I guess. One would be to play. Like, go out and play. It's really interesting to think about the topic of communities now, because my answer today, I think, is different than it would be 10 years ago, because there's this thing called social media now, and people are creating their own communities online and finding affirmation online and really being creative, both tech creative and like content creative, which is super cool, and also like another level of like community that I think young people are very aware of and old people are still kind of getting hip to. But I say go out and play. There's also nothing wrong with finding a mentor. I've had many mentors in my lives, and they weren't necessarily called mentors. They might have been like uncle or like social worker or like pastor or choir conductor, but those mentors connected me to resources and invited me to places where I felt welcomed, where I then was able to like find other people in the forum community. As a young person of color, there were many places in the neighborhood where I didn't feel welcomed, and there were a lot of like barriers that I created that I thought I wasn't good enough to like go to like classical shows or go to the ballet. And it was like silly to think like that. It wasn't until someone was like, no, come on, let's go. And I was like, oh my God, I can go there. Then you start to like realize that you belong in those spaces. You can be a part of that community. Same thing also with like just hanging out with older folks. I feel like there's so many stories and experiences that older people bring to the table, but as a young person, you might not ever have the opportunity to really sit down and talk and like learn and find the value that people get. And I actually owe that to a lot of adults really respecting me and treating me like a human, and then me being able to then see them as human and form genuine friendships and relationships. And I didn't know how important it was as a young person, but now, man, as an adult, those friends are the directors of organizations. They are the organizers. They are the managers. They are the ones who are like helping me get tickets and go and see things. And if a musician who stuck with musicianship for 30 years like I did is a professional musician now. And so it's crazy to think about how when you stick to something and you don't give up, you become really good at that thing, and you become a leader. And so keeping those relationships, forming those relationships, having it be organic and based off of community is important. And I tell a lot of young people that if you want to go somewhere fast, go by yourself. But if you want to go somewhere far, you have to go with other people. And the music is not a isolated thing. You have to be able to like work with an engineer, work with a concert promoter, work with a booking agent, figure out choreograph with a dancer and like other bandmates. There are so many other social aspects to music that I will say is really about community and bonding and like having those people. People refer me because they know me. They're like, "Hey, Corey's a cool guy. You gotta know him, right?" So it's like,
That is
and then,
exactly what happened.
I'm on their brain, and when you're on someone's brain, it makes all the difference, you know. And that's why I think it's important for young people to like go meet the guy behind the camera if you're interested. Go talk to the band after the show. Ask who the manager is and be like, how'd you get that job? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
it's important because I feel like people know people, and that's what forms relationships and build community. Um, People like to help. They also need to know how they can help, you know? And I think that's a part of getting into the room and seeing what people have and what people can do. And a lot of people are really willing to like share their knowledge. And it's getting rid of that barrier in between that helps that communication happen.
I love what you just said, and I especially love talking about kind of the barriers that a lot of performing musicians, especially those who are not thinking about like classical performance, like that's musicianship, that's it. And I especially want to highlight something that happened this spring that was really incredible, which was during our performathon. AJ helped co-plan and lead a social jam where we had 3 different day habs and a lot of other folks, all adults with disabilities, come, and we had this big performance. And each site had their own song that they shared out. And I think a thing that was really poignant that one of our music therapy intern and now our music therapist who just got board certified today, Hannah Johnson, your champ. But she said, she was like, they're all musicians. This is just, they're all performing musicians. This is a performance. And so I was wondering, AJ, if you could talk to what inclusion and accessibility looks like in performance. How do we make folks of all abilities feel and know that they are welcome and they should be intentionally invited in those spaces?
Yeah, I think it really comes from an understanding of the needs of the people that are looking to come into those spaces, looking to perform, you know, and not just like our own understanding of what those needs might be, but also really getting to know and understanding the people that we're working with, and learning from them. What are their needs in order to really access a performance, or to feel confident in that space? What are the things that we can do to really, you know, work to remove any like barriers that might be in the way of accessing that confidence and that feeling to really have that opportunity to perform. You know, whether it's something physical like changing the way that an instrument might be laid out for a client who might have like a physical disability and have a need for support in that way, or whether it is you know, providing some sort of space or ritual to be able to feel comfortable in a space, the ability to go and take breaks as needed, the ability to feel to feel confident in the room and in the space, whatever those needs might be. But really, you know, knowing the people that you're working with and understanding them both, you know, from your experience with them, but also, you know, being open and ready to listen to them based on what they might need any given day.
I just want to point out, I really loved hearing how all of our conversations about performance connected so naturally to community and even to musical exploration. The idea of, I want to see what the sound designer's doing, I want to see what the cameraman's doing. I want to go explore these other possibilities, not just my own instrument. I think it's just amazing to see just the fluidity of all of these pathways. I keep thinking about Siad, what you said when talking about your practicing guitar and saying, I want people to know I like this piece. And as Rachel was saying as well, you know, performing musician doesn't only mean playing the classical canon and playing your, you know, Mozart and Beethoven. Being, you know, learning about composers that maybe you hadn't heard of, representing composers from different styles and different backgrounds is a part of being a good performing musician. So maybe you could speak a little bit more to the work that you and Castle of Erskines does to elevate composers who haven't had their fair shake.
Yeah, so we don't say this like publicly at Castle of Our Skins, but we believe that Black music is for everyone. And so that means that anyone in our Boston community should have access to our performances, but it also means that we think that musicians of all races, ability levels, genders should also play the music of Black composers. And we're working to make that a reality. And we're seeing, maybe not at the pace that we would love, but we are seeing substantive change across the field being like larger classical music. And I always think about how I came to know about Castle of Our Skins. So the organization was founded in 2013 by friends who were attending New England Conservatory. And I think I learned about the organization maybe in 2017, 2018, because of blog posts that they were writing and creating about Black composers. And at the time I was living in Georgia and studying guitar and doing the music school rigmarole, as Josue said. and my guitar teacher was great. Just had no idea that there like were any Black composers, not for the guitar, but just any at all. This was before Florence Price became, like canon, right? Like before she became like, the it girl, I guess, in in music again. And so I had to find that out for myself. I had to look and figure out who were these composers, like did they exist? And of course now we I think we mostly know that they do exist. So it's my job to ensure that more people know earlier. And so that's the work that we're committed to doing.
I want to stick with that because the thing that I've also heard is talking about how so much of social advocacy and justice and work goes into musicianship. It feels really, really difficult and impossible to separate what it means to be a musician and to be integrated into what is happening and what my part in that is. And I was wondering, I think especially if you could speak to, I think Boston is such a unique and wonderful community, and a community that also has a long ways to go in other ways. I was wondering if you could speak to what your musical journey has meant specifically for you as an artist in Boston, engaging with specifically Black composers, Black pedagogy, all of this incredible work.
So when I first moved here, someone said Boston is either the first, last, best, only about everything. And and that's true. Like you'll meet somebody you'll meet somebody and they're like, "Oh, yeah, I'm the first this." And you're like, "Of course, it's in Boston." And I really think that means that there's so much opportunity here for people to create the versions of themselves that they want to be, and to share and explore and carve out a space for themselves to exist. I know a lot of people who work in very small nonprofits, and I work in a small nonprofit, but there's like one person nonprofits, and I think it's because they live in a city and in a state that believes that arts and culture are a vital part of our society. And so they feel supported to be able to by themselves start their nonprofit and do it and make it their job. And that doesn't exist everywhere, but it exists in Boston. And sometimes I want people in Boston to say like, "Oh, we're doing good. Like we're doing a lot of positive things here." I hear a lot of, "Oh, such and such institution is doing poorly and we need to do better." And it's like, yes, I totally agree. I want to encourage us to all continue to improve and to acknowledge that we have come a long way in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I'd love to open that up to any other panelists as well about to speak a little bit more about how your musical journey or your musicality intersects with and interacts with your work in Boston.
And 10 points if you do a great Boston accent. You're thinking about it.
I came to Boston straight out of grad school to teach at Conservatory Lab Charter School as a part-time teacher. And so I've only been able to scratch the surface as a performer within the city in terms of like the gigging scene and all of that. Yeah, I would say the city itself, there's so many more opportunities I feel like now for especially talking about pathways, right, for young students. I feel like pathways for just college graduates. There's more organizations, there's more jobs open, there's more opportunities for folks to be able to plug into the ecosystem. I feel like when I first got here, it was still pretty, everyone was in their own silos and pretty isolated. And so I've been able to enjoy that, those walls and those barriers kind of breaking down over the years and being able to be more collaborative with folks who, you know, might have gone to like the rival conservatory or work at the rival nonprofit or what, you know, whatever that means. I think, and I think you would all agree that with a lot of change that's been going on, especially at the leadership level of a lot of these organizations around the city, not only in the arts sector, but just at large, I think there's a spirit of collaboration that I hear, and that's I think it's palpable, but I hear from many other people agreeing that is really refreshing and really exciting for the future of the art form, but just the arts in general and nonprofits in general. So so that's kind of where I currently kind of reside in terms of my work in Boston is continuing to learn about new amazing organizations that, you know, learning what they're doing in different neighborhoods and learning about these communities that are in places that are just really obvious, but I just never happened to think too much about. And it's pretty exciting. It's an exciting time right now.
I would say that Boston has a very rich cultural history. You think about like James Brown performing at the Garden while the rest of the world was like rioting after Martin Luther King's assassination. You think about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X coming here because there was a vibrant jazz scene and people really dug the jazz scene in Boston. There's a very rich church community, which I think is based off of faith and religion. And so I bring up the history because for me, it's like 1991. 91 was the year of like prevention. And that's when a lot of nonprofits like Zumix, Artists for Humanity, a lot of other nonprofits like got their first kind of like funding. And then it was really prevention, keeping us young kids out of trouble because they were blaming everything on teenagers. And then that then allowed a space for like people to like have an action to prevent us joining gangs. Let's make music, or prevent us from like doing drugs. Let's give them a space to make music and or do art and be expressive with art. And I think that Boston is a very smart city. And so you have like the conservatory, you got Berkeley, you have all these students and people who are like studying and who are going out and creating like jam sessions and other things all around. But for me, things that stuck out was first, when I was younger, there was a thing that I was a part of at the Jorge Hernandez Center called Critical Breakdown. It was the longest running all age open mic. And it was the first time that young people from all around the city would come together and have our own open mic. And one thing that stood out to me is there was this one time when this young person had gotten shot, and they held that open mic as like a remembrance open mic, and people were going up and saying poems and doing songs, and the DJs was playing songs that were all like relevant to the theme, and it was like a room full of love and buzz, but also a lot of artists. It was their first time to ever perform in front of an audience. It was the first time people saw break dancing and wanted to jump into the cypher and break dance. And then after, there was a cypher where all the rappers would like rap and freestyle and battle and see who was the best rapper. And you want to come back next week because you practice all week to go back to the cypher and see how good you were. That kind of evolved into another thing that I was involved in called the Subway Ciphers, where literally every Sunday there'll be a group of rappers at Downtown Crossing rapping while people were coming in and out of the subway. And I'm like, I'm not sure if that could happen in other cities, but there was enough resiliency, there was enough camaraderie, and enough people there who knew what they were talking about where we didn't get kicked out. We're like, this is a public space, we have a right to be here. And we rapped, and they got really big and created this whole like freestyle clinic culture that's around there. So I bring up like this idea of like it being just a gritty urban enough city, close enough to New York, but still close enough to Vermont, right? Where, like, where you can kind of get away with trying things and doing things and being really kind of raw and urban-y. You say there's Harvard, but check out the pit right in Harvard Square. We have all these punk rockers, right? And then you think about like all these other like kind of organic subcultures that could have been a response to like these preppy places, but at the same time, they were able to coexist and still be there. And so you kind of maneuver your way through this thing where then now we have all these organizations and hip hop nonprofits and strings orchestra programs, which I think kind of all came from that gritty, like, what are we missing? What can we create? Let's create that. And then that cycle continuing. What are we missing? What can we create until the point where we're at now? And I think it's very special because other cities might not have the infrastructure to kind of like support that raw grittiness, and other people wouldn't, like, I'm not sure who else is gonna be like, you kids can have an open mic, all ages, whatever you want, or be like, who's organizing the subway cipher? I don't remember what adult was there that was organizing the subway cipher, but we were showing up, so it's kind of interesting.
I think I remember a professor once said, like, of course, Boston is the place that had within the same century, like Rite of Spring and BBD and Tina Turner and like all of these incredible artists, because you really see this depth and you really see this evolution of like something really pushing kind of against and really pushing forward. And maybe it's because I'm from Texas, which is doing great with funding and arts right now. But I wondered if, AJ, I know you have something to add, but I was wondering if you could also think about like how Boston allows folks to explore what music has meant, or in your experience, like what that has meant for this Boston community.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt like I would be remiss if I didn't also add just a piece of talking about the experience of being a bit siloed. I originally come from like small town Maine. And so, for me, spaces where resources are a bit limited, exposure is definitely limited to different experiences, is something that I really kind of felt the need that I wanted to continue to explore, to get out of that bubble and to really embrace the opportunities of a city like Boston, not only in the work that I do as a music therapist, but also just in my own the depth of my own experience and really trying to be constantly learning, be constantly absorbing, really be kind of a sponge and just taking it all in, while also really trying to build on a sense of identity for myself as well. And I feel like Boston is a space, as others have mentioned, that really gives that permission to really try different things and to really, just is such a melting pot of so many different cultural experiences, backgrounds, musically, artistically, in so many different ways. And, I think Boston really does lend itself to that space to really explore different spaces and learn about, what you really connect with and what you can even just increase your awareness of as a picture of like the broader culture that we have here. And I think that a lot of the organizations and spaces that you're hearing from today really demonstrate just so many different avenues of how that those opportunities come up for different people that live here in the city and the people around it as well.
I'd love to stick with this explorers topic for a second and go back to something you said earlier, AJ. You were talking about helping your students find comfort in the exploration. And I'd love to kind of explore that sort of paradox between leading into students' comfort and also pushing their boundaries as they explore. So how do you kind of navigate that paradox of helping them feel comfortable, but also expanding their comfort zones as they explore new avenues?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it has a lot to do at least in my own experience with, recognizing the strengths of each student or each client or, whatever term, we might use for different people in our programs. I feel like it's really about like seeing those moments where they're shining and really focusing in on those and saying like, wow, it is so amazing the way that you're contributing to this, the way that you're holding that shaker up high and you're just keeping on going, no matter what, you're not stopping. And how can we take that moment, that moment of joy, that moment where you're feeling your most confident, and be able to kind of transition it slightly. I might do it through like introducing like just a very slight variation on what they're already doing, what they're already feeling comfortable contributing, and see if we're willing to kind of go that way, go that direction. If that doesn't work, that's okay. We can go another way, just kind of, exploring a space of comfort isn't necessarily like you're pointing out, giving the opportunity to have those moments of discomfort and feel safe in that environment riding it, while also I think facilitating just kind of that ebb and flow as it's shifting, being more open and maximizing on those moments. And then also, when it feels like too much, maybe we're a little overstimulated, maybe it's just a lot, being able to kind of slide back into that a little bit more gradually. And then when we're ready again, feeling that space of stasis, we can flow into a new zone, and just kind of, bopping around, bipping and bopping.
Love a good bip and bop.
Bippity boppity boo.
Oh, Jared, you're the best. Okay. I have a question for Dr. Wells about citizen musicianship, and I guess for the panel at large, because I think that we're talking a lot about Boston, and we're talking a lot about the arts community, and all of us have this moment of thinking about our young musician self. How can we, as an arts community in so many different places, support musicians, young musicians especially, where they are and where they want to go? I would love to, let's start with you, because I know that you have thought really intentionally about what it means in terms of representation, but also what it means in terms of growth and that evolution of musicianship. I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I think what I would tell to young people is like a couple of things, or maybe it's like one long thing, but it's like it's okay to have other interests, and those other interests can and will inform you as an artist. So for instance, I really like basketball, and I know in this town that's good, like a good thing to say.
You were saying
But-
like you were ashamed.
Yeah, but I'm not.
I
See,
know,
that's the
no,
thing.
for sure.
It just
But-
depends on which team you're supporting.
Well-
Yeah, we should talk about this really quickly.
But I think a lot of young people, especially who are kind of following a really performance oriented musical pathway, can get sucked into this idea that they can't have other interests. And so they get kind of like siloed into a thing. And like, I remember being in music school, being a young person, and asking people if they liked other things. And they're like, no, I only like to practice. Just like, well,
Time for everything.
yeah. And
What of other things?
yeah, and there are definitely times where I wished I had let myself experience other things, because I think that would have helped informed how I see music now, and how I can continue to use my platform and my privilege for advocacy efforts across all different kinds of things. I think we're in a moment now, or have been in a moment for a while now, where we're seeing people who are in other spaces. I'll go again to the athlete example, but you see athletes like advocating for social movements. And I think artists now, because we're seeing other people do that, we feel like we can in a more public way, like our institutions can stand up for social justice movements. And so I would say that it's good to explore and to have other interests, and it will, in a positive way, impact what you do in the practice room and what you explore and how you play that concerto.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember actually when I was at Berkeley, and I was finishing up, and there was this stupid senior seminar, and a musician who is very famous and won't go unnamed. It was a guy, of course, it was a guy. And I was in music therapy, and everyone was going around, and he was like, "What's your dream? What is your dream?" And it was a lot of people being like, "I'm gonna be the next John Williams," which was incredible. I'm gonna be the next, I'm gonna win a Grammy next year, which was incredible. And I remember saying how my dream was to be a music therapist. And he was like, "Why would you waste your talent?" Like really, truly, he very seriously, he was like, "What a devastating loss." He was like, "You did all of this work to get here, and all you're gonna do is help other people." But like, that's really how a lot of musicians think about it, of just like, well, why would you, God, why would you help other people with that? Like, what is wrong with you? So I was wondering if you could kind of speak to that mentality and how we can even like almost shift it. Because that is such a thing, especially for performing musicians, like you said, of like, it is okay to have other interests. But how can we support making young musicians more holistically like able to represent authentically themselves and their future? Oh, sorry. It's a big question for you.
Yeah, that's
Can you solve this crisis?
yeah, I was like, I don't think I have the answer, but I'm definitely working on it. I mean, I could not agree with you more. I think I get a lot of questions of like, "Oh, so, do you still play cello?" And I'm like, "Well, like not as much these days." And everyone looks so sad, like, "Oh, that's so terrible. Like, that's so awful." I was like, "No, I mean, I'm spending my time in energy giving opportunities to other people to do that and even more, right? And for me, that brings me 10, 20, 30x the joy that I had playing on a stage, even if it was like in my peak performance experiences, seeing a student like absolutely kill it after like struggling with something. There's just nothing like that in the world for me. And so that's a good question. I think it's incumbent upon us now that I'm in a position of responsibility to curate those experiences for students and for this next generation, to have it not be like it was when I grew up, which Siad was saying, like 100% being in a bubble of a university or a conservatory where that was the prevailing attitude. It's like, you're wasting your time doing other things instead of practicing more. When in reality, like all sorts of studies now show that like that's actually the complete, it's not the complete opposite tactic that people should be taking, but the more that you generalize, like I think there was a statistic about Nobel Prize winners. Don't you think it's kind of weird that the Nobel Prize winners of like God knows how many decades, they all speak like 10 languages. They have like 8 different specialties. They do all these different things. They didn't just do the one thing that got them the Nobel Prize, right? And so for me, fighting against that, for me, that what it says is that you're not smart enough, you're not capable enough to do more than one thing, right? And that once I started thinking about it that way, then it really, really started to kind of irk me inside. And so, in our program, we have students as it past several years that I've been at STEP. Some of our top performers don't actually go into music school. They actually go to Ivy League universities or other types of high-end colleges, NYU, Notre Dame, Harvard, Columbia, and they were the best musicians of their class, right? And so I think for us, not pigeonholing students into having to do the thing if they sign up to do the thing, but just being very, very clear, this is a vehicle for you, and you can take this wherever you want to take it. And it will improve your quality of life.
Mm.
but we support you in whatever you do, right? Like that just saying that out loud is apparently revolutionary in the classical music education world. So that's, that's what we try to do at Project Step. And again, being in positions of responsibility for young people, I think, that's incumbent upon us to create those environments.
Yeah.
Yeah, so many people I know who've gone to, conservatories or pursued music have those horror stories of professors who shot them down. And I even think about people in my life who, who consider themselves not musical because they had that same experience with an elementary school teacher who said, oh, I don't have a good ear. I don't have a sense of pitch. I don't have rhythm. Like, you do have pitch. You do have rhythm. You're a human being. We all do. So I'd love to hear from AJ or Corey your thoughts on this topic.
No, the experience that some folks do have, like you're bringing up, Jared, with the non-musical background, and like that limitation that people will impose on themselves in terms of like, oh well, I'm not musical. I couldn't sing. I couldn't bring in that space. And so much of the work that I do in a lot of the spaces that I am, around a lot of the adults that are around these children or other adults, trying to create that musical space for me means encouraging that the musical space is welcoming and accepting to everyone that is in that room, regardless of where you may feel your own level of comfort. And sometimes it's hard to really get some people who have that like background of feeling like they're boxed into the non-musical track, giving them the space and the permission to say, it's okay to sing. It's okay to jam along with us. It's okay to just like dance along, groove along. However you want to participate in the musical experience is okay. And, you don't have to be like a Juilliard grad. You don't have to be like a professional musician to just embrace the human experience that is making music in one way or another, whatever that might look like. But it's okay. It's okay to be there.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Corey, I was wondering if you could take us home with your
Oh,
thoughts on
yeah,
how
I'll
we
take you home. It's really interesting because my experience, I feel, was more like, you're not going to make it. Like, that's not real music. You're not a real artist. And I always had to like prove that it is real art and that I am a real artist. And so it was interesting to think that like most of my career was always trying to like prove to someone that I am worth it. I can be this and I should be on stage. When it comes to supporting young musicians, it's really interesting. I feel like young people are still coming out of a crisis. We are, the post-pandemic era. And so like social and emotional core competencies, I feel like are still at play when it comes to our young people. School might not be doing it. Home might also not be doing it. Usually for people who don't have the privilege to go home to a full family and a cooked dinner and a Sunday, dinner with the family. Like, not everyone has those environments where they can have dialogue and talk about all that they're consuming and all that they're taking in. Most of the times the parents are just giving their sons a tablet or a phone. And that's just also like leading to a whole bunch of like, how is this person making honest decisions? I go into a classroom nowadays and I'm like, what do you think? And the kids are like, and I feel like, a long time ago, kids were really anxious to tell you what they think, but now they care more about like what other people like or what's more popular. And I feel like that's a way of limiting creative intelligence and making that part of your brain not grow because you are not daring yourself to be like who you are and what you want to be. And so I feel like creating spaces for young people to be themselves is super important. At home, your parents might want you to be one thing. At school, your parents might want you to be another thing. And so I value at my community center that we want to help the young people become what they want to be, which is really important because it might be the only place throughout a whole day where they are let that, they have to like, they can be themselves. And what's important to them is really important. Not everyone is going to make it. Not everyone is going to be a star. Not everyone is going to make the band or like get the job. And so one of the things that I did at Zumix was, you know, our pedagogy is not about just the artistry development, it's about the development of the whole human being, like their personal development, their artistic development, their level of civic engagement, and then also their professionalism. How are you getting paid and making a living, or be able to make a living with this thing that you like? Because at the end of the day, we want people to be able to help make healthy decisions and to be contributors into the world. And so our graduates might not be graduates, but we have like a state senator who was an alum. We have police officers, we have arts therapists. Our young people see themselves as a part of the world and being a part of that world. And I think that that's really important. Some places will focus on artistic development, but for us, it's just as important that you have your personal development and your civic engagement in line, and then also know your value in terms of professional development. So it's like a structure that I think is important. It gives some people something that they might not get either at school or at home. And at the end of the day, it's really about creating like a safe, free zone where they can mess up, and then learn. I always tell people, no one's gonna be the best at Zumix. We're all gonna be really great at being the worst. And failure then becomes a really good learning tool, and no one ever fails. We just like learn, which is great.
It is an absolute joy to hear all of these things. And I have a almost 2-year-old toddler who interrupted our strategic meeting yesterday. And it is such a comfort and a joy to know that she can grow up and have a holistic idea of what it means to be a musician, and feel so supported by so many organizations. I heard a critique of Boston recently that was like, you know, we're resource heavy and collaboration poor. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, because I think it has been one of the coolest things. Zumix and CMCB are working together in East Boston, and it's the coolest thing to know, like, oh, we can send them over there, or like they can send us. It is the coolest thing to know, like, oh, we can bring some of our students, we can bring them Castle of Our Skins, so they can make sure, we can refer them to ProjectSTEP to make sure that they feel represented, and this ability to holistically grow and get really good at the things they really are excited about. I know we're getting close to time.
We'd love to open it up if
I'm
there's any
making eye
questions from
contact
the
with Jeff
audience.
and Lexi, who are my bosses
We have
today.
time for some audience questions. If you're on Zoom, if you want to add a question to the chat, I think, or anyone here in the room. Any questions for our panel?
Zach
Yes.
Sheets. I know him.
So as an only child from Vermont who used to live in Harvard Square, I've caught a lot of strays tonight.
Do we feel bad?
No, so my question is ultimately one of why do you think an educational framework like this matters, and like what could it mean to the communities where you are teaching or making music? At CMCB, I think we feel it matters because it provides intention and accountability to thinking about how we formalize and celebrate all the motivations that bring students to music, right? For me, it matters because my education became very, very narrow. I went to conservatory, and my sense of self-esteem was around being a performing musician. Being excellent became inadequate. I had to learn something not until I could get it right, but until I could never get it wrong. So I'd often play a doubling game where I had to play something right 8 times in a row. If any one of those was wrong, 16 times in a row. If any one of those was wrong, I often played things 128 times in a row. Which is to say, it wasn't about being excellent. It was that my excellent had to be more excellent than other people's excellent. And that's not a way to build a sense of like confidence or camaraderie. Right? And so what I had was actually not the worst thing. Like it's not that I didn't know there were other pathways, it's that I had scorn for them. And so a framework like this would have shaken me loose from that. That's why it matters to me. I'm curious how it matters to you all. And maybe you're in a similar place, or maybe you're ahead of the curve, right? Maybe you're like hip hop communities have known this for a long time, right? Maybe like arts and health people have known this for a long time and you're just catching up. But I'm curious how you relate to it. And as you hear this and think this, like what of it could be resonant with the places where you teach and make music?
Great question. Great question. My brain goes to, there's so much you can do. And if your organization can like figure out the geometry that you want, that's linked to your mission, vision, and values, then you can like focus on like core competencies and areas of growth. So for you to call out community and like musicianship and leadership, that then takes this whole big universe of music and says, this is what we're going to focus on. And then you can define to yourself, as an org, what do we believe community is? And how can we measure that? And then how can we put our resources, energy, and thoughts within that? And you have the opportunity to ask the young people too, because they're there, right? What does it mean to you? What do you want to see it to be? And I think that it's really important when you can start to focus and tune in to like how you spend your energy and what you want to get out of it. And so I know it's kind of loose saying like, it's not, I'm not saying it's so specific, like, yeah, I love this, I love that. I think it's just important to like have that. I think about all the drop-in centers all over the world that have this opportunity to have a structured program, but they just don't. No one ever has a conversation about like, what do we want kids to get out of here? When a young person comes into the door, this happens and they leave like this. No one ever talks about the this happening part. And that's why. And so I think the more clear you can get about, no, this is what happens. It helps your advocacy. It helps your fundraising. It helps when someone comes to the door, like, let's do an open mic. Like, okay, so where does that land in terms of like what we want to do and how we want to focus our energy? It then brings up the conversation like of, is it important under like artistry for the person to play the song 160 times or not? Right. And so I think it's important because it creates that dialogue. It creates the idea of like, what do we want? Where do we want to focus our energy? How can we measure it? And then that's what then is going to set you apart from my org and from her org and from his org. And the idea of like, what are you bringing? How you bringing is like awesome. At the end of the day, the person is getting what you want them to get. And it's not a guessing game. It's not a, what did you do today? It's like, no, by third year, you should be at this level or at this competency. So I think it's a great question, but I also think that it's a great way to just kind of like control like what you have going on in your space.
Oh, another question.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Stephanie Munoz. I'm an NEC alum, and I'm also a music director in Jamaica Plain at the Margarita Munoz Academy. So I taught band there for 5 years, and 2 years ago, I started a steel pan and Latin percussion ensemble. And so we're talking about access, and so maybe like a brainstorm or something, but when we're talking about access, and especially when we're talking about classical music, because I'm classically trained, but also play jazz and other genres, how are you intentionally breaking away from the core of classics? And it could even be like in hip hop as well. Because I feel like something, obviously you have to know the greats, you have to know your history. It's so important. But I also feel like so many organizations get stuck in these lanes of like, okay, we're just doing this and we're doing it over again. And also access, meaning like, are you stopping your students at a certain point and saying like, we can't go past go because you haven't done X, Y, and Z. So something that I'm doing with my program is our students don't have access most of the time to elementary or middle school programs. So as ninth graders, they're coming in completely beginner. For instance, I have a 10th grade ensemble, which are my beginners. The majority of them are actually coming from other countries, specifically DR and Puerto Rico. And so they're also learning English. But I have to put them in a concert. But I don't want to do the same like classical trope of like, okay, you're going to play Mary Had a Little Lamb as your first concert in 3 months. I think that that's ridiculous. And I also just think it's like, it doesn't connect with them. They're high schoolers now. If they were fourth graders, maybe. And so I have literally created whole new systems for us to be able to communicate where they're learning the form of a song. And they also get to choose like, what are we doing? So Dominican and Puerto Ricans, they love them bow. I'm cool with that. You would never see the BSO have that on stage, absolutely ever, right? But in terms of like inspiring them and motivating them and feeling like they belong and being excited about presenting that to the community, it has an incredible impact. And they're still learning their whole notes and their half notes and stuff like this. Also, when I get to my 11th and 12th graders, they need to be challenged even more. We're playing music from Bad Bunny's newest album. They can't read, dotted 16th, 18th, 32nd notes. So I am at the drawing board. So how are you creating access and how are you allowing access past certain points where they actually might fail very hard, or you have to teach it in a different way and it might have to be by rote, and not written. God forbid you learn something from ear, like our communities have done for years, and in many different communities around the world. But like, what does that look like in your organizations? What does that look like in your life when you're having contact with young people? Because I think it's really important.
Ooh, I see AJ. AJ's ready.
Yeah, yeah. Woo. I think to your point, really understanding like the preferences and the why of what's drawing them into the music, right? And with the work that I do, I'm always looking for, what is the music that you care about? Why do we what is the music that you're listening to? What are the aspects of music that you're really interested in, and really leaning into that? Because I think focusing on that draw, focusing on that energy, not only indicates that flexibility of going with the moment, but also indicates that we're listening to the students, listening to the people that we're working with, and understanding like this is what you care about, and I want to show you that I also care about what you care about, because I care about you. And the ways that you can access music, and the ways that you can be exposed to it, the way that all of us have had our own experiences with music, and just provide that extra support on the journey.
Any other questions?
Shout out to you too. I just saw your Selena video online with your ensemble. They were awesome.
Anything for Salinas.
I just want to lift up some of the positive energy that's been happening in the chat here. People have been sharing thoughts. Someone said, enjoy the process. Many youngsters leave the journey thinking they do not belong since they are not perfect. Someone else shared excellent knowledge and leadership demonstrated by all the panelists. Thank you. Someone shared a heart emoji, and Gail said, bravo, Corey.
Gail, you're getting some love over here, just so you know. I also see who I assume is my father. So shout out to David Chow too. Oh, Gail's here. Getting a lot of airtime, Gail. Good.
I just wanted to add two very quick things. One, piggybacking off what you were mentioning about aligning your organization's mission. We just finished a strategic planning process last year in which we, for the first time, actually had core values. Those are collaboration, community, and excellence. And just like having that written down and having that understood, now people don't ask, hey, like, why are we taking in the middle of the Saturday time to like have parents bring in food and like hang out? There's no question about that now, right? Stuff like that like we know is important, and we've codified it, and we can always go back to that. So that's the incredibly poignant point. And I love what you're doing on Margarita Muñiz, and let's keep talking, because I've actually been in touch with Cecilia Soriano about trying to include you guys more. Yeah, she's everyone's godmother. So we'd love to have you guys collaborate more with BSO and folks that stuff that we're doing over there. Yeah.
Amazing. Any other questions? Man, what a joy.
What a joy. Really, really inspiring, amazing. Thank you so much to all of our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you to Gail, who
I want to thank each of
And to all of you
you
in
because
person and the community
I want to thank each of you because what you're doing is so, so important. It's social and emotional learning. It's learning music, which is so wonderful, as you all have stated so beautifully. This is a bridge for us now, at the time that we are now, because music creates bridges between people and for people. And we're going through a very hard time now, and music more than ever is important. And I'm just so happy you're doing what you're doing. I'm so happy that I've been doing what I'm doing for so many years for the arts, for students. And it's a wonderful journey. And I just hope we all can gather again and see how this conversation resonated with each of us and what have we done with it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you all for coming. Take care of yourselves, sustain yourselves, find some joy in music. Have some snacks. Have a lovely evening.
Success.